named Mr. Homer Creed, who was the manager for Chaffetz. Mr. Creed came down there, and I did not know any of this until a couple of weeks ago. He came to work at the new Posey's in Langley, and he'd worked as he had worked as the manager for Chaffetz. Paul Posey managed the Langley furniture store, and Dudley managed the funeral home. And they lived upstairs for 4 years there. Which the old funeral home, of course, everybody knows now as New Bernatown City Hall. Dudley and the family lived upstairs in an apartment at Langley Funeral Home for 4 years until the Posey family purchased the large Victorian home at the corner of Georgia Avenue and Buena Vista in North Augusta. And that's when Dudley, and Stephen, Alice Marie went over there and managed that, and then Uncle Paul stayed managing the funeral home and the furniture store. And the Posey's in North Augusta remained on Georgia Avenue for many years. Dudley went to North Augusta to manage it. The building was torn down. It is now Circle K, right down the corner, convenience store. I went over there and spent a few nights with Stephen. We were both 15 years old at that time, and 15, 16. He may have been a couple years younger than me, but that was quite a shock for me because, well, I'll get into that in a minute. But Uncle Paul took over management of the furniture store and the funeral operations in Langley. Later, Posey's in North Augusta was relocated on out to Georgia Avenue, across the street from the old Nancy Carlson library and Channel 12 News right next door. That was the library, and Dudley and Stephen purchased that. David Posey, Tom Posey, and John Posey, John Jr., I guess you would call him, they managed the Granville locations. Paul managed the Langley locations, and Dudley and Stephen managed the North Augusta locations. In 1988, I better go to the glasses, make sure. 1988, the Posey family decided to sell Langley, Granville, and North Augusta. All of them were getting a little long in the tooth, and they'd been in it for 1900, and those that were born after that. So they sold it to a large major conglomerate out of Texas called Sentinel. And that was in 1988. And when Sentinel closed Langley, it became the Bernatown City Hall. And the old furniture store next to it was torn down, and I think it's a park now. After the sale of the three Posey funeral homes, Stephen and Dudley opened a funeral home in South Aiken, out not too far from Duke's restaurant, way on out. They later sold that and relocated. They had all of these guys that own funeral homes. I don't care where I've been to a funeral, all I'd have to say is Posey's Funeral Home. Oh yeah, they all one big group that know each other from the association in the South Carolina Morticians and Funeral Home Association and all that thing, sort of like the builders. They had a friend that owned one in Louisville, Georgia, that was sick and was wanting to get out. And so they called him and asked him would they come and run it for him for a while. So Stephen and Dudley sold the one in South Aiken and went to Louisville, Georgia, and they were there for 6 years. I didn't know it because I was gone. They stayed for 6 years, and then someone in North Augusta sent word to Dudley and Stephen that Sentinel was closing the North Augusta location, which is now Communigraphics. They sold to Communigraphics. Dudley designed and built the Communigraphics building, which was the old North Augusta Posey's funeral home that moved there after they moved from Georgia Avenue. And the day that Sentinel purchased that, someone from North Augusta, some businessman, called Dudley and Stephen and told them that they wanted them back in North Augusta, and that the Nancy Carson Library building next to Channel 12 and the Big Salsa was going to be for sale. And that next morning, Stephen went and put a sign up there that said, Stephen Posey, Posey's Funeral Home in North Augusta is coming. And there was a lot of people that really was appreciative of that. I know I am. It became the current Posey's Funeral Home, owned by Stephen Posey's and his son Walker. And I think last year, Stephen sold it to Walker, and they changed the name to the current name, which is Posey's Funeral Directors. But Stephen still hangs around. The Granville location that Sentinel bought, Sammy Napier had been a long-time employee of the Poseys. When I was living with the Poseys in '59, Sammy was working for him then. And Sammy was the manager of the Granville location for the Texas Sentinel Company, and eventually purchased it for them. He and his wife Glenda owned it until Sammy retired in 2022 with health issues and died a few months later. Glenda sold the Granville location to Clint Jackson, who was an employee, and Clint started working for Sammy in 2006. And last year, he purchased it from Glenda, and it is now Jackson Memorial Funeral Home. I'm gonna pause right there. Has anybody got any questions or any comments? I know y'all got more stories than I could possibly ever know. Yes, sir.
Where's that brochure you keep referring to?
It's going to be passing, it's still on the back. Pass it forward. No, I had two, smarty. Two of them. So they would start coming this way. So I don't know where the other one, okay, they're still looking at the pictures. I'll give you one myself. That's around here. I spent my own printers ink in the lab, and I had to go borrow paper from Shannon this afternoon. No questions so far? All right. Now let's get back to Uncle Paul, which is what we're here for. My parents both died in 1959, when within 6 months of each other, and I was 15 years old. And I had a 10-year-old sister. We lived in Columbia, lived at Gonzales Gardens out near Providence Hospital on Forest Drive. I was so fortunate to come live with Uncle Paul and Aunt Marie. Marie was as I said, Marie was my mother's sister. Her name was Emily Jennings Thomas Bowers. And they were two of the finest people I've ever known. They were like my mother and father. It was not easy having me as a teenager dumping in on somebody who's been married 45 years. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But they did take me in, and I'm forever grateful. My sister went to live with my mother's other sister, Annie Mae Jennings Heath, in Columbia. The Jennings name, I'm sure everybody remembers, Odell and Jesse. If you've been around long enough, you remember Odell and Jesse Jennings. They lived up Piney Heights Road, I'm almost sure.
They lived on Dunbar Street, right next door to me.
Okay. All right. And their daughter Cleo. And her husband, Pete Scott. I remember going to Uncle Odell's one time in my life. He lived right on the road, didn't he? Right on the highway?
Yes, sir.
That's what I remember. And I think Miss Diamond told me she remembers a bunch of them going up and sitting out in the front yard and telling Cleo to play boogie woogie on the piano. Pete, Cleo's husband, was in a quartet, and so was Cleo. She played for him. And I believe the gentleman that owned the barber shop in Georgia Avenue, I can't remember his name now. Ed Bruce. Uncle Ed, they call it. I saw him at Pete's funeral when he died a few years ago. But Ed was in that, Pete, Cleo, and
James Allen.
yeah, James Allen. I remember that name.
Jimmy.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's what I said. Y'all have known him longer than I have, but not much longer, I'm sure. I went to live with them in 1959, June the 5th. Mother was buried on June the 5th, and I was down here on June the 5th. I had never been at that time but to 2 funerals, and they were both a month earlier than when my mother died. My Boy Scout troop leader's sister, somebody died, and as a troop, we went to that in Dunbar. And then the next one was my dad's. And that was November 16th of 59, and mother died June the 1st of 60. And boom, I was out of there. But to move into a funeral home scenario and going around dead people, I was scared to death. But it finally got okay. During the summer, I went to Granville High School in 1960, and during the summer, Aunt Marie worked at Elizabeth Wolf. Nope, not Elizabeth Wolf, excuse me, that was in Columbia. She worked at Star Luggage, and she worked at what was the latest dress shop on Broad Street? Oh, I thought I knew it. Forget. Huh? No, just exclusive latest.
Something like Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, Fifth Avenue.
I went there.
Yeah, that's it. She worked there, so she wouldn't let me stay at home. So I went to Langley. And I would sit there with Mr. Creed, Mr. Homer Creed. At that time, he was blind, and I didn't know anything about him, other than, did he live a block up behind the store. Before he lost his eyesight, he'd worked for Chaffetz as manager, and Posey hired him to come down and work there. And when he became blind, all he did was sit in the chair at the back of the furniture store with me, and we would listen to Mutual Game of the Day baseball on radio with Mel Allen and whoever. And he loved the Detroit Tigers. I remember that distinctly. And then someone had taken a metal clothesline out the outside on the side of the parking lot of the furniture store. Like if the furniture store was here, the funeral home was here, cars would park like that beside the furniture store. They had a clothesline with a big post on one end and a big post on the other end out close to 421. And they'd put an old-time bottle opener, soda bottle opener in that with a wooden handle on it, and he would walk up and down that line all day long, just to get exercise. And he never complained about anything. And I was told that they paid his salary till the day he died. And I know that was many years that he was there. Uncle Paul and I would usually go to lunch every day to Jack's Grill. Anybody remember that? Remember where that boy was? It was across the street from old Fernando's, wasn't it? In the corner of Rabbit, we call it, that's Rabbit Hill, isn't it? Anybody remember that was across from Fernando's Grill to eat lunch? I was told that you could get enough grease in the food there to last you a month. And,